Hello, year 10s. I hope you're all well. Today we're going to start looking at Stave 3 of A Christmas Carol, which features the second of the three spirits, who has become known as the Ghost of Christmas Present. So in your booklets, if you'd like to follow the extract, please, we'll start by reading the Task 14 extract, and then we'll gradually work our way through it. "And how did little Tim behave?" asked Mrs. Cratchit, when she had rallied Bob on his credulity, and Bob had hugged his daughter to his heart's content. "As good as gold," said Bob, "and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see." Bob's voice was tremulous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. His active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool before the fire. And while Bob, turning up his cuffs, as if, poor fellow, they were capable of being made more shabby, compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, and stirred it round and round, and put it on the hob to simmer, Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high procession. Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon, to which a black swan was a matter of course, and in truth it was something very like it in that house. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy, ready beforehand in a little saucepan, hissing hot. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigour. Miss Belinda sweetened up the apple sauce. Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. The two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard upon their posts, crammed their spoons into their mouths, lest they should shriek for goose before their turn came to be helped. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all round the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife, and feebly cried, "Hurrah!" There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavour, size and cheapness, were the themes of universal admiration. Eked out by apple sauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight, surveying one small atom of a bone upon the dish, they hadn't ate it all at last. Yet everyone had had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witnesses, to take the pudding up and bring it in. "Oh, a wonderful pudding," Bob Cratchit said, and calmly too, that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now the weight was off her mind, she would confess she had had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been flat heresy to do so. Any Cratchit would have blushed to hint at such a thing. We're now just going to run through a few words and phrases that may be a bit unfamiliar to you, just to make sure that you can fully understand them. Where it said in the extract, rallied Bob on his credulity, this was assuring Bob that it's fine, that he believes anything he's told. Where it says Bob's voice was tremulous when he told them this was basically meaning Bob's voice was shaking. Where the extract says the two ubiquitous young Cratchits, it's really referring to the fact that the two young Cratchits seem to always be present. Where it says Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigour, that means with lots of effort. And where it says it would have been flat heresy to do so, it is suggesting that it would have gone against the accepted opinion. This is meant to be a little bit humorous, this line, because heresy would normally be something to do with going against some kind of religious doctrine. So it's suggesting that the whole family have this view of it being the most amazing meal ever. So to have gone against that would have sort of almost been like committing heresy. We're now going to consider some of Dickens' methods. So within this extract, not a long extract, but there is a lot that you can use to support your ideas about this particular novella. So Dickens' methods. In this particular extract, there are a number of structural features. So, for example, we have the characterization of the Cratchits being developed here, and they're being developed as a very Christian and caring family, which for the Victorian readers is showing that they are upholding Victorian moral values. And Dickens has included this in there, this characterisation of the Cratchits, because it's basically showing that the readers that poor people are just as capable of upholding strong Victorian moral values as the wealthier, more educated middle class readers. We also have the positive family atmosphere within this extract does provide a stark contrast to their poverty. Now, there are lots of clues to the fact that this is a poor family throughout this extract, to do with the shabbiness of, for example, the some of their clothes, the fact that the way this meal is being presented, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Also, by the end of this extract, there is a bit more for us to read in a minute, but by the very end of the extract, we see something of Scrooge's character development. He is starting to change by showing care for other people's lives. As you will see, he will start to show some care for Tiny Tim, which is important for the development of Scrooge's character within this novella, because he is beginning to understand that a person's life is more important than money. There are also a number of language features that Dickens is using within this extract that it would be important to focus on. So, for example, we have the use of exaggeration or hyperbole, and we have the use of irony. We're going to have a look at a little bit more of those in the extracts in more detail shortly. But Dickens exaggerates the Cratchit family's reaction to emphasise how grateful they are. And we've highlighted a few of those in yellow. And then ironically, the reader can clearly see the meal is not a feast. And this causes sympathy. Okay, it is a fantastic meal for this family, but by certain standards, it would by no means be considered an incredible feast. And those are highlighted in blue. So we're going to have a look in a minute at the use of exaggeration, also known as hyperbole, the use of irony. We're also going to have a look at the areas that are highlighted in green at the very positive family atmosphere that is being shown, because that does show us their incredible gratitude and how thankful they are for even the small amounts of luxuries that they have in life. So first of all, let's have a look at our exaggeration. So we have some exaggeration when the goose, the bird that they are cooking as their Christmas meal, the meat part of their Christmas meal, is a feathered phenomenon it's being described at. Well, a goose in the Victorian era was something that was not one of the most expensive meats that you could buy, and was not really considered to be a feathered phenomenon, which would be something quite out of the ordinary and quite amazing. And in fact, Dickens then goes on to say, to which a black swan was a matter of course. Now, a black swan is something that is pretty rare, even today. I think I've only ever seen one black swan in real life, but geese you can see flying around quite often. Then we have, if we go further down and we look at the green, we can see something of the positive family atmosphere being developed. So grace was said. So again, this is showing that this poor family uphold the traditional Christian values that were considered to be so important in the Victorian era. Then we have one murmur of delight arose all round the board. Again, shows they are a very grateful family. They're so grateful for everything that they are being given on this Christmas day, and that they don't take anything for granted. Then we have a bit more exaggeration. There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Well, that sense of never and ever is clearly a very exaggerated term. And again, it's showing his gratitude to his wife and for the meal that's in front of them. We also have further down in the yellow, the exaggeration, that Bob Cratchit said he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Again, so this is really exaggerating just how amazing this meal is to his wife and the whole family. Then we have in green, we have lots of positive family atmosphere. We're being shown incredible gratitude from this family. So they have universal admiration for the meal that it is in front of them. They are very thankful for what they are able to eat on that day. Then we have Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight. She is clearly delighted that there is even one small piece of bone left upon the plate, suggesting that nobody went without anything because there was still one tiny morsel there, so therefore everyone must have had enough. So they are very grateful that they've had enough to eat on this particular Christmas day. Again, then we move on to in the green, a wonderful pudding. So now they're starting to say how amazing the Christmas pudding is. And they're going to, again, show their incredible gratitude for the fact that they are able to have it and to Mrs. Cratchit for cooking it. Then the irony, which is key to understanding and unlocking what is really happening in this extract. This is in the blue. The irony of things such as eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes. It was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Well, if something is eked out, it is really being kind of sparingly spread out. And again, the applesauce and the mashed potatoes are helping to spread that meal out. So the meat, again, which very often people consider to be the main part of the Christmas meal, the meat itself there wasn't so much meat that they could have as much as they wanted of that, and then just everything else was the aside. The meat is being eked out, spread out amongst the family, also with the applesauce and the mashed potatoes, and they're making it a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Makes it sound like, yeah, it was enough, but it doesn't sound like they had so much that they were, there would be some left over for the following day, for example. Clearly that is not the case. So, and then moving down to the other blue highlighted area further down the extract, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. Again, the use of irony here shown through the juxtaposition of small and large. So clearly what Dickens is telling the reader is that it in fact is a small pudding and this is a large family, but they are grateful for it nevertheless, and none of them would ever dare to say that they didn't feel that this was enough food, or that they felt deprived in any way. They are actually just very grateful. But Dickens is using irony to actually show the reader the reality of this situation for this family, and therefore for poor people whose plight he was trying to bring to the attention of his readers. These methods lead us on nicely to Dickens' intentions in writing the novella. He was showing through the novel the contrast between rich and poor. He continues to develop the themes and context of A Christmas Carol within the extract we have read today, as he does through the whole of the novella. Dickens uses the Cratchit family to show that being poor does not mean you are lazy or a criminal. The Cratchits are depicted as a religious and hard-working family who care for each other very much. Throughout the novella, Dickens is providing social commentary upon the economic divide between the wealth and privileged lives of the rich people in Victorian society and the hard lives of the poor people who often did not have enough food to eat. Dickens wanted his wealthier middle-class readers to understand the need to support the poorer people in society. Okay, so now it's time for you to answer questions 1 and 2 of Task 14. The two questions are, despite being poor, the Cratchits are a happy, loving family. How does Dickens show this? Choose 2 quotations from the extract that we have just read, the extract above. Then question 2, how does Dickens describe the character of Tiny Tim in the extracts on the slides above? Why do you think he is important to the message of the story? Surround his picture with your ideas. And what I would do there is pick out some key quotes from the extracts that we have read on the previous slides, note them down, and then annotate them with your ideas about what they are telling us as the reader. Okay, Tiny Tim has an important part to play in the character development of Scrooge, and the Cratchits have an important part to play in showing the readers what a poor family can be like, and that they can uphold traditional Christian and moral values that were valued in that era. We're now going to read the rest of the extract. A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us, which all the family re-echoed. God bless us, everyone, said Tiny Tim, the last of all. He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him. Spirit, said Scrooge, with an interest he had never felt before, tell me if Tiny Tim will live. I see a vacant seat, replied the ghost, in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die. No, no, said Scrooge. Oh, no, kind spirit. Say he will be spared. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race, returned the ghost, will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief. Okay, so a quick vocabulary check there. Penitence, if you're not sure if that word means regret. So this part of the extract is showing that when Scrooge hears the ghost say to him the words that he had said earlier about poor people, that he is now feeling regret and grief. Okay, so a key part of his character change is starting. So then, having read this part of the extract, you have 2 more questions to answer for task 14. That is question 3. Why is the following extract, the one on this slide and the next slide, very significant? And which words have come back to haunt Scrooge? And then 4. How and why does this vision of the future by the ghost of Christmas present change Scrooge's attitude to poor people? Okay, so that is the end of this session for today. That is covered all 4 questions for you for task 14 and the extract. I hope you have enjoyed this. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care, Year 10s. Thank you very much. Bye.